go on to the next of the presentations by our dear Lori. And Lori is the reason why this is happening. Because she is the one who 4 years back wrote to me and said, can we have this visit? Can we have this yoga therapy trip? And then it started working out, and we were going to have it in 2016, and then it didn't work out, and 2017 it happened, and now 2018 is happening again. So thank you, Lori, for making it happen, and I invite you to give your presentation at this time. And this time, not just her, but Steve is also with us. So we have both the halves.
Morning. Hi, look at all these people. Well, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you, Nandaji. Thank you so much, and to your whole team, and Nina, and everybody who's here. We are beyond happy to be here. I think we're still on the high from last year. So many of us, we even have 2 people who came back with us again because it was such an incredible experience to be here with you all. So we're really grateful to be here, so thank you. And this morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about the journey that I've had in working with chronic pain. So I've been, a little bit about my background. I'm, by training, a physical therapist. So back in the 80s, I got my bachelor's in physical therapy, and I started to practice, and I started to work with chronic pain patients. And at the same time, a couple years later, I started my yoga studies, my yoga practice. And about 10 years after I'd been practicing, I went to Australia and got a master's in physical therapy. They call it physiotherapy over there. Because chronic pain is something that's very difficult to work with, and I wanted more tools. So I got more tools. And then I continued on the path, and about 10 years later, I got my doctorate in physical therapy. So I wanted more tools because I was working with people who were suffering quite a bit. And what I learned on this journey was that the tools that I was gathering in my personal life and my yoga practice were the tools that were helping my clients in chronic pain. And at the same time, I started probably in the late 90s to study pain science, neuroplasticity. Because in the chronic pain world, neuroplasticity was a big word. And back then when it started, it was all about the doom and gloom of chronic pain. So when you have chronic pain, these terrible things happen to your brain. Your brain has all these changes, and this is what's happening in chronic pain. And because I'm a scientist, and thank you, Sandy, a scientist and an artist, I'm going to keep that now. Not just a scientist, I'm more of an artist, actually. And science is an art, so thank you for that. I was also studying, wow, how is this yoga helping me so much? What's the science of this? From both the yogic and the medical science backgrounds. And what I saw was that the changes that were happening in neuroplasticity from meditation and yoga were basically the opposite to these negative changes of chronic pain. And I thought, wow, this is the answer. That's not the end of the story. So I want to share with you the next part of the story and where it's gone from there. Because my experience at this point is that I'm finding the neuroplasticity to be a bit reductionist. It's a bit narrow-minded, and it's missing an elemental piece that I want to focus on today. So this is basically what we have in, I would say, medicine, and particularly in neuroscience. We get one piece of the puzzle, we think we have it figured out, and then a few years later, oops, we were a little wrong there. Here's a bigger piece of the puzzle. I don't think we really know what's going on. And this is not to say don't do research. The research is what is enabling these powerful tools to be available to the public who need it. There's so much suffering out there. And I know that in the United States, if I were to be sharing yoga in my medical practice, or my physical therapy practice, I work in a medical clinic, integrative medical clinic with the underserved in Los Angeles, where I supervise yoga therapists getting their hours. We could not show up with yoga if there were not scientific studies from a medical perspective that said, yes, this is beneficial. They wouldn't have valued it. So it's very necessary. And I think we have to keep it in perspective as to what it is. It's a piece of the puzzle. So, what is chronic pain? Chronic pain, by definition, is pain that lasts more than 3 months. I think a lot of us picture that when someone has chronic pain, they're, barely able to move, when in fact, I found this interesting when I did some research on this, that statistically, India and the United States share about a 20% of the population have chronic pain. So I just thought that was, I only knew the United States data, I found the data from India, from both 2018. So that's a pretty significant amount of population, and 50% of those have pain of an intensity of greater than 7 out of 10. So this means that at least 10% of the population here in the United States suffers from intense chronic pain. It's also extremely expensive, and there are many comorbidities, so many other problems that come along with having chronic pain. And I think anybody who's working in yoga therapy will be dealing with one of these things. So really, what is pain then? If we're working with this, everybody that we're going to deal with has it. What is pain? Does anyone have an idea of what's pain? Anybody? Yes? Yes?
The psychical adjunct to an physiological deficiency, by sharing that for the great physiologist. Psychic adjunct to an imperative reflex. So that is it. Now suppose I get a pinch by somebody. It makes close hand. It is very pleasant pain. I will enjoy it. That's psychological. Physiology is different, psychology is different. Same, I was wondering if the pain can be depressive, bad pain. Can you come into good pain through yoga? It will stimulate you and make you work better.
Good pain through yoga.
Unless it's too much pain.
Ah.
Mild pain, moderate pain, you come into good pain. Because it's psychological effect. So it drives you, makes you work better.
So, and what I'm hearing is also that perception, is how are we perceiving it, right? Are we perceiving it as bad or good, and what are we doing with it? So thank you, and that is what I would consider as a definition of pain. However, I'm just going to skip ahead for a second here. This is what most people are perceiving as pain, which is what we call nociception, which is a little piece of pain, versus what the doctor is saying is actually there's a psychic component. Nociception is not the same thing as pain. So I'll just set the stage of what nociception is. So this is basically a sensory response to a stimulus that could be a pressure, it could be chemical, it could be temperature. And we'll do a little bit of science here. So we have here a pinch or a pin, which is stimulating. So if we pinch ourselves, we all pinch yourself. And if your eyes are closed and then your neighbor pinched you, how would you know where the pinch is happening? Because what happens is that it goes up through a neuron, and it goes here to something called the dorsal root ganglion here, which is just outside of the spinal cord. It goes up the spinal cord, it goes up to the hypothalamus, actually goes through the brainstem, goes to the hypothalamus, what's going on in the brain here, through the thalamus, to the sensory cortex, as Ananda was saying yesterday, this upside down man in your brain, which is a map of your body and your brain. It says, oh, being pricked in the index finger of the right hand here. And that also processes through our limbic system, our amygdala, our emotional center to say, ooh, why'd you push me? I don't like that. That wasn't very nice. It also is processed through the prefrontal cortex, and the hippocampus, which is the memory center, saying, hey, have we been here before? Have we been pricked before? And the memory says, yes, and last time I was pricked, I got tetanus. And the prefrontal cortex says, tetanus, not good, could die, forgot to get my tetanus shot. So therefore, this descending pathway through the cognition, this is all through the brain, comes back and says, make this intense pain because we are in an immense danger. So therefore, we have an experience, because pain is an experience, with all of these factors that says this is immense. That's the nociceptive aspect that stimulates this experience of pain. Now, it could be another system. That could be where you get the same finger prick. Same thing, it goes up the dorsal root ganglion, goes up the spinal cord, goes up to the hypothalamus, to the somatosensory cortex that says we are being pricked in the index finger of the right hand. Hippocampus, do we remember this happening before? Oh yeah, happens all the time, not a big deal. Prefrontal cortex, what do you think we should do about this? Don't worry about it, not a big deal. Descending pathway of minimal sensory experience. That's really what, to describe in a nutshell what it is. So, don't look. Let's go back and see how we got to where we are. Now we'll have a little history lesson, okay? We had our science lesson, it's all the courses that your kids are taking in school, and now we're going to have our history lesson. So, about the time of Patanjali, this is the history lesson from pain in the Western medical model, or the modern medical model, we'll say, was that back around 300 to 400 BC, it was considered in more the Greece in those areas, it was punitive, it was from an emotion, and I love this, passions of the soul, which you can see the little demons there. I kind of think of that, maybe it's karma, right? Maybe that's a little bit of that karma that's sitting there. And does anyone know who the second guy is? Hippocrates. So Hippocrates, although he was known for coming up with this, actually pain has to do with impurity of bodily fluids. However, Hippocrates was also very much a mind-body man. He did believe in the mind-body science. And then I'm not sure how you pronounce it, a Persian philosopher, Avicenna, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, was the first on that side of the world to say pain is a sensation. So that was the first time, 17th century. So keep thinking in the back of your mind here, what was Patanjali saying at the way back in the beginning? Then we have here, does anyone know who this is? Descartes, yes, thank you. Which he looks a little ornery to me there. And he came up with the specificity theory. Although many will argue that he didn't mean it to be that. So many things get taken out of context when you say one thing and they make that the whole thing you said. But he did come up with the specificity theory, which is basically if you have pain, it's because something has happened to the body. It was damaged, and it goes on one nerve up to the brain, and that's what pain is. And that's kind of what many are still functioning on today, even though it is a very antiquated model of what pain is. And that's what led in the 20th century to the biomedical model, which as you can see is what? Pills, right? I need to get tablets so that I don't feel this. And then moving on to the 21st century, we have the biopsychosocial model, which is starting to say now, oh, wait a minute, emotions and thoughts and the psychic aspect are actually involved in the pain experience. But who knew that a long time ago back here? Patanjali, right? So if we look at the sutras, all of this, and what I'm going to talk about a little bit more at the end is the biopsychosocial spiritual model. The biopsychosocial model was actually created in 1977 by a man named George Engel. Most of us didn't hear about it until the 90s, and many in the medical world are still not even up to date with that. They're still on the biomedical model. So I'm not sure how far into the future the biopsychosocial spiritual model will be, and yet I believe that's where we need to go, and we're starting to go there. So the biomedical model is still predominant. And what is the management of pain? Opioids, surgeries, anesthetics, distraction. I worked in a chronic pain clinic in the 90s, and we were actually told that they had pain behaviors, and we were to ignore them. It was miserable for both the patient and the practitioners. So how do these work, right? We know, as Sandy mentioned, there's an opioid epidemic. There's an epidemic because people need to be taking more because their bodies adapt, they change, and it's not working. They're ineffective, it's temporary relief. So if you have a surgery, it's very effective. You need that for a temporary period of time. But for chronic pain, it's ineffective. Multiple side effects. And basically what are we doing? We're suppressing the sensory experience. We're basically saying don't have this experience. Okay? So pain, as I said, the experience. Pain is an experience that has all of these aspects. It has a sensory aspect. What are the qualities? Where is it? We could call that in the Panchamaya model, in the Annamaya, what's happening in the physical body. Then we have the affective. What are the emotions involved in this? And we could consider that the Manomaya aspect in the Panchamaya model. What are the emotions and the mind thinking about this? Then we have the cognitive, which could be the Manomaya and into the Vyanamaya. what are the thoughts related to this? And if you remember when I talked about the brain there, we do think about that is the prefrontal cortex. Is what am I thinking about this? What am I going to do? That's my board of directors, the executive board of directors. What are we going to do about this? We've got a message, and what are we going to do about it? So the biopsychosocial model integrates all of these. So the biopsychosocial model says, oh, okay, these emotions and thoughts are involved, and these can actually increase or decrease the pain experience. And that's what led to, about in the 1960s, cognitive behavioral therapy being involved in chronic pain, mindfulness, focused, relaxed breathing, the body scan from Yoga Nidra, and these practices that are more of the mind-body practices for chronic pain. What do these do? These actually focus on the sensory experience with a really important piece here with non-evaluative body awareness. And this is a key piece because in medicine, they've known that we have scales called body awareness scales. And what these scales are things like, I'm aware when I'm thirsty, I'm aware when I'm hungry, I know when I have a stomach ache, all kinds of things. And in medicine, if you score high on a body awareness scale, that has been correlated with more increase in symptomatology, increase in pain, it's a negative thing. However, if you practice mindfulness practices, you may score very high on those, and yet have the opposite. So how do you balance these? And this is the key, non-evaluative body awareness. So versus, oh, what am I feeling in my stomach? Oh, did I eat something that poisoned me? Uh-oh, am I going to be sick tomorrow? Is the rest of my week work? Is that going to happen in this hypochondriacal experience? Versus, I'm feeling a pressure in my abdomen. Oh, pressure in the abdomen. Let's move on to the next sensation. So this is a quality that we can nurture, which comes from, again, who talked about observing the subtle sensations? Patanjali. So now neuroplasticity. So we're, again, going back to, this was in science, it's been what's happening in the brain here, what's happening in the brain here. So neuroplasticity has given a lot to the study of chronic pain and to yoga. It's gotten us in the door in many places. And I value it very much, and yet I think it's missing a piece. But I'll go through a little bit because I said I would. I promised I would. So it's basically the capacity of the brain to change. And when I started to study it, it was, oh, in chronic pain, these terrible things are happening, your hippocampus is shrinking, and your amygdala is growing, and all these terrible things. And yoga was a difference. So let's see here. We have the somatosensory cortex. And that's the image of the little man that Ananda was talking about is upside down in your brain. This is basically the map of your body and your brain. And what we found from neuroplasticity studies is that when you have chronic pain, the sensory cortex, which is the part that takes messages from the body, grows. And the motor cortex, which is the part that controls your ability to have movement and coordination, shrinks. So what does that mean? It means that you have increased capacity to feel pain and less capacity to control your body. So that's something that we learned. Then we have over here the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So the amygdala is known as the emotional center, your fear center. And this gets very much involved in chronic pain because if you have a sensation that is unpleasant and lasting for a long time, you can imagine that's quite upsetting. So the amygdala gets very worried about this. The prefrontal cortex, that board of directors, it can have a good and maybe a not so good. And it can be known as the worry and rumination center. So the board of directors can sit there and say, what's going on, what are we going to do about this? Or it can make a rational decision and say, it's okay, let's not worry about it. So it's that higher function. So we've learned a lot about that area. Then we've learned about the insula. Deep, deep, deep in the brain is this place called the insula, which is also involved in pain regulation, as well as empathy and compassion. And I found it really interesting that people who practice yoga and meditation, their insula grows. People who are in prison, who have committed heinous crimes, have very small insulas. There's actually a study done on that. So it's interesting, but nobody has ever come to me for yoga therapy or physical therapy and said, Lori, My goal is, could you please help me grow my insula? I'd like to have a larger insula because I heard it would help me. Nobody's ever said that to me. So when we think about Sankalpa, it's not necessarily can I change these areas of my brain, it's what lies beneath these changes. Then up here we have the hippocampus. So in the memory, it stores short-term memory to long-term memory, and that's also involved in pain, and that can make pain become a memory. And there's also studies that have shown that pain can become a memory. Who spoke about memory? Patanjali. Then we have the caudate nucleus, which is also involved in habit and pain regulation, as well as are we going to be in reaction or are we going to be in response? So that area also changes. And basically, we don't really know. That's basically where I'm coming to. These things keep changing because for many years I stood up and spoke about this stuff, but then we learned, oh, wait a minute, this is not the full story. This is the full story. And I'm going to put a little point there because please don't quote me that this is the full story because it's not the full story. And I've been in many a lecture where there are people standing up being punitive. Those of you who are talking about the areas of the brain, you shouldn't be doing that. It's this. And I'm sitting in the back there thinking, well, how do you know it's that? And how do you don't know 5 years ago you're going to say, no, that's not that. Anyway, the default network. So basically, we are wired for survival. And pain, when you have the experience of pain, is am I in survival? And therefore, that downregulation is how much do I need to do to protect my body? So what do we do in yoga and meditation is we use the dorsal attention, the concentration, attention focusing, so that we can shift to the present-centered network. Which again, who actually described this? We found this recently. Who described basically this whole process a long time ago? Patanjali. Come on, there we go. Everybody not with me out there? Yes. What are they basically saying? Retrain your brain. So that's really where neuroplasticity science with chronic pain has gotten to, is we need to retrain our brains. But again, now please, ready? 1, 2. Who said that a long time ago? Patanjali. Thank you. So, if I may say that Patanjali wrote the manual for chronic pain therapy thousands of years ago. And I'm not kidding. So let's see a little bit. I selected a few sutras that I will be interpreting. I believe that the Yoga Sutras were meant to be used, hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of books that have interpreted. And this is a little way that I've done some interpretation for this purpose. So in the Yoga Sutras, we have the obstacles to our practice, right? The antarayas, these obstacles. And I've highlighted that disease is listed first because disease can cause all the rest of these obstacles. And I'm going to put pain in that disease aspect. So we can't even practice if we're suffering from disease or pain. And it blocks us from and causes many other issues. And then dukkha, so we have dukkha and sukha that we were talking about yesterday. And the accompaniment to these obstacles is one of them is suffering. And we can consider pain within that dukkha. So these imbalances cause changes in our body. It changes our breathing, it causes worry, loss of hope, all these things I've been talking about. This was written thousands of years ago, and science has just within the past maybe 50 years been discovering this. Then we have where Patanjali says that the concentration on a single object is the best way to prevent these obstacles and their accompaniments. This is the best way to do that. Well, that is the subtle sense perception. So what are we going to focus on? We can focus on the breath, and we can focus on the subtle sense perceptions, which is the breath. And that's what's going to be the solution to the suffering. Well, let's see here. That was proven in some studies, here's one, that there was mindfulness breath meditation. Now, this particular study was done in non-experienced practitioners. First time ever. And they did a single 20-minute session of mindfulness breath meditation. And the image on your left is basically showing that the brain was very interested in pain. So they were given a pain stimulus, and we can measure amount of pressure that's given when they say it's pain. And the brain was very interested. Lots of areas in the brain wanted to know what's happening to the body. Then they did a 20-minute mindfulness breath meditation, and they redid the test. There was a 57% reduction in pain sensation, pain signals. And basically, they did a functional MRI, much less of the brain was interested. Okay, we're not in danger. So that was one session, which is basically highlighting what Patanjali said thousands of years ago. And then also saying here that by controlling the breath, the exhalation, controlling the calm exhalation, extended exhalation of breath, that's basically focused, relaxed breathing, right? Slowing down the respiration. And we have grade B evidence for that being effective in both improving quality of life and reducing pain. So, and elevating mood. So again, elevating mood. So basically, focused, relaxed breathing, which is a relatively new practice for chronic pain management, was described by Patanjali again thousands of years ago. Now moving on, we have Pratipaksha Bhavana. The students that I work with all know that's my favorite. They even gave me a bracelet that says that. This is my ultimate favorite. When we have negative thoughts, we should replace them with positive thoughts. That's basically cognitive behavioral therapy, which came around in the 60s, 1960s. So let's look at the steps of cognitive behavioral therapy, which again has been proven to be effective for chronic pain. Become aware of the behaviors. Svadhyaya. Right? Svadhyaya is classically study the text, and modernly let's study ourselves. Let's self-reflect. Then we have observe the negative thoughts and behaviors, recognize our samskaras. Then we have change to positive thoughts and behavior, Pratipaksha Bhavana. And then we have practice, Abhyasa. So all of the 4 steps of CBT were exactly outlined by Patanjali. So he was a CBT therapist before anybody else was. Then we have my favorite, which was Ananda was talking about yesterday, which I was laughing, because this is what my research is based on, the research that I've been doing in visualization, my ultimate favorite, which is by focusing on the navel plexus and by focusing on the arrangement, you can understand the whole body. And I love that Gitananda says, you won't need an x-ray, an interpretation, you can understand the whole body and its constitution. Which would seem very radical if I were to say that to one of the physicians I work with. We're going to do some visualization on the body and they'll be all okay. They will probably shoo me out the door. However, I'm grateful for research because research has given me the capacity to say, hey, this is actually true. So from the 60s, one of my favorite studies, this is a basketball study. How many are familiar with this? 2 people have sat in my class talk about this every time. So this study was done in the 60s, a basketball study. They took, they took basketball players, and they said for, I think it was 20 days, they will practice their free throws. That's very measurable. How accurate is your free throw? Another group visualized the free throw, and another group did nothing. So let's see what happened. Those who practiced improved their accuracy, it's very objective, 24%. Pay attention, those who only visualize, 23%. Almost the same by visualizing, because the brain does not discern between reality and imagination. Those who didn't, nothing happened. So the message is visualization is very powerful. It can also increase strength. Can you imagine that? So what this study was, they took subjects and they immobilized them in a cast, because when you're in a cast, you don't use your muscles at all and you'll atrophy. 15 of those people in the cast did visualization 5 days a week. They imagined doing strengthening exercises, contracting and everything. Another 15 didn't wear a cast. It's another 15 when the cast did nothing, and another 15 didn't wear a cast. So we had the immobilized group lost 45% of their strength. That's expected. Those who did the imagery lost only 24% of their strength. So that's basically 50% less loss of strength by just imagining. So I believe that everybody who's immobilized needs to be doing visualization exercises. Why I was interested in this, I used to work with professional sports athletes, and they get paid a lot of money. And I was told to get them back out there as quickly as possible because they're being paid even if they're not playing. So they did visualization. That's now forwarded to virtual reality studies. What they do in virtual reality studies is it's like a little kind of high tech. And one of them was when they imaged it, they have an avatar tail. And they actually have the capacity to control the tail. And there's another study that was done that when adults were doing virtual reality that they were children, they started to move as if they were children. And this was similar to the research that I did with Ellen Langer, because she looked at people, when they believe they're younger, they actually physiologically take on a younger body. And then we have the rubber hand studies, which show kind of the negative of it. This is somebody sitting here who is, there's many of these studies that have been done, and they're looking at a rubber hand, not their own hand, their hand's hidden, and the rubber hand and their hand are being stroked at the same time, simultaneously, they feel this. Then they stop stroking the real hand, and they only stroke the rubber hand that looks like it's their hand, and guess what? They feel it. So then someone did sadistic studies, and they stabbed the rubber hand, and the person started saying, ow, ow, that hurts. People watching also said ow, because we have something called mirror neurons. So basically what these are all saying is that pain, this is not, how can you have pain in a rubber arm? It's basically saying pain is not about the physical body exclusively. It has more to do with what's going up here in our perception than it has to do with what's going on here. Therefore, our practices and in the real hand. So in other words, the real hand acted physiologically as if it was having pain. So again, it's all about what's happening up here. And this is in 1975. I put the date there because that's when this came about, and it's still just creeping in. But I'd like to just plant a seed for the future. Because I still keep going back to Patanjali. And I say, wait a second, what did Patanjali say about this? Let me see, because all along he's been right. And he says that when we start with discernment on the changing level of the body, we can ultimately recognize that which is not changing. And that's a lot of the practices that we do. Sean this afternoon will be doing a practice with us about really recognizing that we are not this physical body. And so much of the suffering is that identification with what's happening with this. And that's the piece that I think in this model of the biopsychosocial is missing a little. And we have, when we talk about the Panchamaya model, it's oftentimes correlated with the biopsychosocial model. But it really needs to be correlated with the biopsychosocial spiritual model. That's the piece that I think is not been highlighted enough. And I thank you again for speaking about that psychic level, because that capacity to recognize that pure wholeness within us and identifying with that is actually, I believe, the true answer to this treatment of chronic pain. And I think until medicine really embraces that we have a spiritual aspect to our being, that we're going to be falling behind the ball. And so I'll leave you with this so that you have there's a little bit of hope, is there is spirituality in medicine that is coming about. And this is a piece here. It's called the Inventory Bio CSSI. And basically, the items in this spiritual symptom scale: peaceful, a reason for living, your life has been productive, peace of mind, sense of purpose, ability to reach deep down into yourself for comfort, and a sense of harmony within yourself. This is within a Western medical model. And this piece of this that is just slowly coming into medicine, again, Patanjali talked about a long time ago. And if we truly, truly are going to be focusing on reducing suffering, versus, yes, we can fix the knee, and as a physical therapist, all those degrees, it was really all there in Patanjali for me of what I needed to do to work with clients of chronic pain as well as myself. And so I think if we can recognize that piece of us within ourselves, that the patients, again, they don't come saying, Lori, I'd like peace of mind. They say, I would like you to help me feel better so that I was like, for what? So that I can play with my grandchildren. And really, what does playing with grandchildren give you? Joy and peace of mind. So they just don't know, and Sean will speak about that later. They don't know yet what they want, and that's our job to help guide them so that they can know what their true essence is. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lori, for that lovely, lovely, lovely presentation. And I think she deserves another round of applause. I think one of the biggest joys is that here we are finding people who are integrating the modern medical approach and the traditional yoga approach. And that is what this university stands for. We welcome our respected Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor SC Parija, one of India's best-known medical educators who has received the highest award, the B.C. Roy Award. And we are privileged to have Sir guiding us. And Lori doesn't know it, but in the audience, she has had some of the most eminent medical brains sitting here. Okay, I didn't tell her before because that would make her nervous. But you have been speaking to a galaxy of people here who have decades and decades and decades of medical education behind them, medical practice behind them. And you have Ravi Shankar sir, whose specialty is pain. So, it is amazing. And what you have given us today is a reminder that we don't have to invent anything new. We have to go back and see what is there, and we have to reanalyze it, reinterpret it, and then bring it into practice. So thank you very much, Lori, for this wonderful presentation. We now go into the official inauguration, and during that time, Lori for her presentation. So I request